Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors here in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission on this podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building transferable or sellable business value and then planning for your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that's transferable and then exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. And as with any strategic planning, it's as important to know what pitfalls to avoid when planning your exit as much as it is what actions do I put in place and strategies, good things that I put in place. What should I avoid? And there are not a few pitfalls to avoid when planning your exit, which might end up being which might end up being the most significant and impactful event in your life as a business owner. So you want to do anything and everything you can to avoid pitfalls for such a significant event, right? Well, we want to help you do that today. We're going to have a discussion about it, some of the more common pitfalls in the next 30 minutes to avoid. And we have with us again our friend Laurie Barkman, who recently authored a book that we're going to use as reference today, Business Transition Handbook, How to Avoid Successful Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options. And Laurie, Laurie's been with us before, but again, here's who she is. She's an author. She's a business transition and mergers and acquisition advisor. She has degrees from Cornell and Carnegie Mellon. She's an adjunct professor at Carnegie Mellon. And she hosts her own podcast, an award-winning podcast, Succession Stories. And she's got all of the industry certifications that we have. And so it's great to have her back. It's always good to see her and have her back with us. And so Laurie, thank you and welcome back.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Walter. It is awesome to be back with you.
Congratulations.
Great to have you, Laurie. We're really looking forward to today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me back as a friend of the show, and the support for the book is tremendous. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
sure. So I'm going to jump right in. You know, Pat's a taskmaster, so he always tells me, jump right in, get moving. So love the book. One of the chapters that really stuck out for me was chapter 2. And it was interesting because, you know, you make the point that Pat and I make to all of our new business owners, which is you have to start with the end in mind. Now, that's a critical point, and hopefully you'll discuss that a little bit. But, you know, I think a lot of the people who listen to our podcast they've been in their business a while. And maybe they're looking at, you know, getting out and starting the next chapter of their life. So the other part of that chapter 2 that I think is really going to resonate with that group is the whole concept of, are you being pulled out of your business or pushed out of your business? And that's a concept that, you know, I never dawned on me, and I forget where we stumbled upon it a year and a half ago or so, but it's really powerful. So I think it would be really helpful just to hear you talk about that some.
Absolutely. It's a great place to start. And as you said, it's chapter 2, and it's the beginning of the book for a reason. And the name of the chapter is that it's about your transition mindset. Your transition mindset affects your actions. And why I call this a pitfall is because so many business owners don't take the time to reflect on the personal things that are important to them, and ultimately creating their personal vision, their personal goals. They kind of put themselves on the back burner. It's very easy to focus on the numbers and the practical things in an exit planning process. It's so quote unquote easy, right? That it just enables us to not deal and not answer the tougher questions. I have a client that said, Laurie, it's been easier for me to build my business than to do exit planning. And I understand that. This is tough. And that's why we're doing the good work of what we're doing together. So how does a transition mindset affecting your actions become a pitfall? Well, There's a number of ways. And let's talk about the push factors and the pull factors that you brought up. What are they? What does that mean? And I'll give you an example of some negatives. The negatives that we might encounter in a scenario where a business owner wants to transition or exit. These negatives could be a death, a divorce, a partner dissolution, a disaster of some sort, the business is in crisis. Understandably, those are all negative things. And that's the wrong time to sell. You might be forced to, but it's the wrong time. Why? Because there's so many things pushing you out, right? In those situations, it's easy to understand why that business might be sold at a discount. It's under crisis for some reason or another. And the owner has to do some level of turnaround or fixing and just getting things on the right track. Those push factors, those extreme examples, we can probably get our head around. It's the middle ground we also have to watch out for. So I'm going to also come back to that in a second. The pull factors are these positive things. When you're an owner that's thinking proactively about your transition, you're excited, you're participating, and you're actively thinking about, what do I need to do to get to that next step? For some owners, it's, I'm going to sail around the world. You know, there's some wonderful stories about that. A young owner in his 30s in Colorado sold his IT company, and it was a modest multiple of 2 to 3 times SDE, but he was thrilled to get to do his vision, which was sail around the world on a sailboat. I just had coffee with someone today. He sold his company probably 20 years ago. And I didn't know this about him. When he sold his business, he and his family, he had 5 kids, sold his company in Ohio, and flew to Australia, New Zealand for a year. They lived in an RV and hotels, and they homeschooled the 5 kids. And that was his dream, to do something like that. They punched out and said, we're going to do this. That is a pull factor. When you're so clear about the next thing and you're excited about it. And think about this, this cognitive dissonance concept, if you remember from our psychology classes in college. If you're at a protest and you don't really believe in the cause, your body is going to reject being there. You're like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? I don't believe in that cause. Well, imagine if you are not participating actively in this proactive process, you're not creating the pull factors, what's going to happen? Well, you might be in this middle ground, which is not a bad place. You're complacent. You're kind of coasting along. Your business is doing fine, but you're not investing in it. You're not investing in yourself. And if you take your foot off the gas too long, what could happen? Well, you might find yourself drifting over to the other side. So there is a study done that was, it was a white paper written by or authored by the Value Builder System and Metropolitan Life, or excuse me, I'm so sorry. It's Massachusetts. I'm going to get the acronym wrong. Mass Mutual. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't want to get it wrong. Mass Mutual. So they authored a white paper on this, and that's where the data comes from. So again, intuitively, if your business and you have more negative pull factors associated, excuse me, push factors, those are going to be really detrimental to your value. There's a negative correlation there. If you have more positive things, more things pulling you to your next, then there's a correlation on the positive. The neutral in the middle, which could be, I'm going to retire, you know, I'm going to just sort of do what I'm doing, is again more of a neutral area, and it doesn't have an effect one way or the other. But I think that's a watch out area for owners. If you take your foot off the gas for too long, your business results are starting to stay the same decline for a number of years, then that could end up drifting in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I really appreciated how you had this chapter at the front of the book, because the whole mindset, and Walter mentioned it, is foundational to everything, and you've hit on it in regard to motivation. Yeah, your client said this. I find planning to exit is harder than building a business. Well, it can be, and one of the pieces is because of all the emotional stuff. So what we have found is, yes, the folks who have the pull factors, strong pull factors, they are much more motivated to do the work that needs to be done in order to plan successfully. But then too, wouldn't you agree that those who have exited motivated more by the pull factors, they end up not being one of those statistics of, 75% of all business owners being miserable within 1 year after leaving the business. The ones who've been or pushed out for whatever reason, and sometimes, to your point, Laurie, they just have to be. It's health or whatever. But the ones who leave because of the pull factors have a much better chance, don't they, of being happy in 1 year out from exit.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's some interesting data around that. And we can ask why. And the answer is complicated. I think there's always going to be a number of reasons why an owner might be unhappy 1 year after the sale, which is where that statistic comes from the Exit Planning Institute. And what I think it ties to is, like you pointed out, a number of things. There's a Wayne Gretzky quote, about, you're missing the 100% of the shots you don't take. And I think a similar thing about regret. What is a regret? Oftentimes a regret is not what you did, but it's what you didn't do. And my theory, if I can call it that, tied to this question is that owners aren't taking enough action to drive the outcome they want. They're not giving enough thought to it. And so when they have the exit and the outcome is what it is, they think coulda, woulda, shoulda, and then they have regret. I have a assessment. It's a personal readiness questionnaire. People are welcome to take this questionnaire if they'd like, and it gets at these things. It gets at 4 core drivers, and the chapter in the book also talks about, I think, 2 of the 4 in particular. One of the main ones is this future vision. Right? Thinking ahead. I had a client where he took, and I did talk about this in the book. I had a client, not his real name, but he took this survey, the personal readiness survey, and on 4 different dimensions, you get a score of 0 to 100. So for all the quantitative people out there, they'll like that, except when you get a 0 on something, then it feels very disconcerting. And my client on driver number 1, which was creating a future vision, literally scored a 0. That did not sit well with him. He didn't want to, nobody wants to be a 0, but it gave us a lot of ground to cover, right? To talk about what does that mean for him. He owned a commercial plumbing business. Name was on the door. Son is in the business. Does the son want it? What does he want to do? He has health issues. Financially, the business is not thriving. Challenge. So he had trouble. He had trouble envisioning where was he going to go from here. And when it comes to this mindset, I call it the transition mindset. If we have challenges today, it's very difficult to think forward and think ahead. And so sometimes owners are sort of stuck in the here and now, and being able to connect the dots to where you want to be so that we can work backwards. When time is on our side, we have the ability to change the course of our future. When we are out of time, we're out of options, and that doesn't feel great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Laurie, let me ask you a question. So the example you just gave of the plumber kind of brought something to my mind. So, I think sometimes a business owner, they have their business going. They're not really, the only thought they have of succession is my son or my daughter is going to take it over. And then because of that, for some reason, they might disregard all the things that you would do, like if you were, selling your company to a third party and you were going to have to build a big management team and really watch your profit margins and your cash flow and everything. For some reason, they think they don't really need to do that as much. But I see 2 problems with that. One is, number one, nothing's ever set in stone. And I think it's especially when you think your child's going to take your business, because the trend is they don't. And number 2, I think just business owners don't think in the sense that all the different exit paths require an incredibly strong financial base and a width of management skills. They all do. People think, well, I'm selling to insiders, I don't need to do this and that. Well, that it's just not true. In order for any exit to be successful, there has to be a strong financial base and there has to be good management. Have you seen that in your experience where someone's been counting on the family member and it kind of falls through?
Oh, absolutely. We can assume all we want, but if we're going to swear a little bit and say, well, that's an ASS, makes an ASS out of you and me, right? It's best not to assume. What I advocate for is to have the conversation. Just like if it's your manager, and especially with family, they may not want it. Why do they not want it? Talk about that. Understand whether or not they do. If they do, great. That puts us on a certain track. If they're in their 20s and you're in your 50s and you're thinking about your child coming into the business, many times these folks are starting out working somewhere else, not in your company. Go get experience somewhere else. Understand what it means to be accountable and, having mentorship and getting experience. Maybe it's in your industry, it's just not in your company. Many times I hear that's a step number one. Step two being, okay, when it's time to come in the business, you're adding value. You want to add value day one. You don't want anyone to have a target on your back that you don't deserve to be there. You want to make sure you deserve to be there and you're adding value. So that's from the next gen standpoint, from call it Gen 1, or the parent or, the elder generation. From their standpoint, they want to keep their legacy moving forward. But if you look at the numbers, the statistics aren't great, that a lot of family held companies don't make it past the third generation. It goes to like 8% or something. And I think a big reason for that has to do not only because maybe the kids don't want it, but why don't they want it? It could be that they're not made to be leading the company. They just don't inherently want it. They want to do something else. That's fine. The other reason could be that the business isn't healthy. It's not an easy business to own. The trajectory of their profits are in the wrong direction. The culture is not great. And, there's lots of outdated processes and systems and yada, yada. That feels like I'm inheriting a turd. Who wants to inherit a turd? Not a popular thing to want, right? I don't want to inherit a turd. I want a great company to run. I want to inherit something that I can just keep moving forward and keep expanding. And for companies that continue to innovate, they continue to keep up and move forward and be differentiated, all the good stuff that any company would want. It's super important for multi-generational companies who want to have their legacy and sustainability of future to think that way. We can't just rest on our laurels. We can't just say we're going to always do what we've always done. And the second generation is particularly vulnerable to this because many times they get the keys. They're told, don't screw it up. The spouting whale is going to get harpooned. So what do? They don't change anything. And then the third generation comes around and is like, gee, thanks. You didn't change anything. Now I'm supposed to. What am I going to do with this? Or I don't want it. So the watch out, I would say, for the founders is when you are really mindful about who should own the business after you, and you want to think about family. If they are not ready yet, that's fine. What are you going to do to put in place solutions to help them get ready over time? If they are interested, then be honest about, are they truly a fit? They might want it, but not be capable, competent, and be the right fit for the next owner. So all of those things are about looking in the mirror, your children looking in the mirror of their interests and capabilities, you looking in the mirror for your interests for the company and its future.
Yep. So let's talk about this pitfall. And I know that you address it in your book. We run into it all the time. And that is how much time it takes to prepare for a successful exit. Where should we start that conversation? Because it's not unusual for Walter and I to get introduced to a new prospective client or someone it's at least crossed their mind that they should have an exit plan, but it's not unusual to hear, I'm not ready to exit. And so hence implied is, so I don't need to start planning yet. And of course, we try very hard to help them understand where, well, if you don't get started, you might not be ready when you're ready. when you're ready to leave, or when something actually starts to push you out of the business, maybe either you personally or your business might not be ready, or maybe financially, you're just not ready, even though you're emotionally ready. So whatever you want to say about that piece, just go ahead and start talking.
When do buyers buy? This is a rhetorical question. When do buyers buy? Buyers buy when they're ready. If we recognize that, and we recognize that we don't always control the time schedule, it changes the mindset. That was my experience with the transaction that I was a part of at a third generation privately held company in the transportation and logistics space. A little bluebird came a calling. We didn't know that this global entity was looking at our company for 6-7 years. We had no idea. The company wasn't listed for sale. They came a calling. It was a proprietary deal. There were no other offers on the table. And we ended up doing the deal, sold the company to FedEx. And it was a very strategic move for FedEx to acquire this business. And they wanted these assets to be stitched in with their operations. And the lesson, I think, for me, as I share this and I share with clients, is you just never know. And that company could have transferred to a number of different, could have been to private equity, could have been to management, could have been, there's a lot of options for that business. And selling to this global corporation, was a great solution. And if you're a smaller business and you're thinking about, no, I'm not ready yet, I'm not doing anything, I'm not going to exit. That's why I talk about transition. I talk about transition in the sense that there's lots of things in your business that are going to transition one day. First and foremost is your ownership. You are going to one day leave your company. 100% of us, it's a fact. Are you going to leave horizontally or vertically? A little tongue in cheek there. And if you're planning to leave upright, then you're probably going to want to have an impact of the plan. That's a tenet of my client relationships, of the book, and certainly from my podcast, is to be mindful of what you want. We talked about that already, of course. And the other part of it is, what do we need to do to get there? What do we need to do and prepare? And it takes time. If you're in your 40s and you just launched your company, of course you're not thinking about it, although maybe you are. What if you're building your business to sell? And there are great examples of entrepreneurs who have built businesses to sell. They don't get too attached. Their name's not on the door. They are arm's length with it. They hire a great management team and they build the business to sell. In contrast, if our name is on the door, we have our identity so tied in, it becomes, it is our job. It's our job. It's not an asset. I advocate that business owners think of their business as an asset. And you know this from your work with clients, that it can be as high as 75 to 80% of their net worth as they've built the value of their business over time, but it's illiquid. If I gave you $100 and I said, you can invest this in this stock, but it's illiquid, you can't cash it out, what are you going to do? Would you take that? It's very risky. It's subject to the fluctuations of your local market. Would you take that free money and invest it in that one thing? But that's what business owners are doing. And if they're not thinking about their business as an asset, they do run the risk of that value deteriorating over time. So what does that mean for our efforts collectively in trying to help business owners create value? Well, the takeaway is that all the good work that we're advocating for is certainly in my book and our practice, for your practice as well. How do we help business owners create value, recognize risk, and mitigate those risks? Is good economic work. It's going to make your business more enjoyable to run, more valuable. So why wouldn't you do it? If somebody's saying, oh, I'm in my 40s, I'm not going to do that, we could challenge them on that because it just makes no sense. Of course you want to do these things. We're not saying sell your business tomorrow. We're saying put good practices in place, have processes documented, have a team that supports you. Don't put yourself in the leadership only, you're the only person who can sell. Don't put yourself in an owner dependency situation. Look out for your client concentrations. I can go on and on about risk tripwires. But inherently, to your question, I think that's where it's at. Is it could be age, it could be life stage, it could be just a realization that there's good fundamentals to running a business will make you happier, make your team happier, and ultimately create more value.
Hey, Laurie, I'm just curious as to what you've seen as far as changes in businesses due to COVID. I know, like, for instance, in the accounting world, there's been a major shift because almost all of our employees are now working remotely. But another interesting shift is that there's a big shortage of staff, which has really forced us to only work with the best type of clients. So it's been a blessing in disguise. The clients who, we've been talking about getting rid of for 10 years, it's like, well, now we have no choice because we just don't have the staff. Have you seen other businesses and industries where, in a sense, COVID has kind of forced them to do a lot of the stuff that we would be preaching for them to do all along to make their business more valuable?
Yeah, I think one of the areas is acceleration of technology implementations,
Yeah,
where
for sure.
sometimes companies have thought about e-commerce solution. Oh, maybe we should do B2C or B2B. Maybe we should add a B2C. We should test that. COVID forced it. There's an example of a company here in my town. They cut fruits and vegetables and they package it for supermarkets and other food service. So their service is the cutting and packaging, and then the retail environment will sell it. So that's clearly B2B. But during COVID, they launched a B2C. They had never really thought of getting that off the ground. It really accelerated it. And it became a small part of the business. I'm not going to say it eventually pivoted, but that was just one example. And I think other companies, certainly on the working remotely side, they had to figure out how to do that. How do we have meetings with ourselves? How do we maintain a culture? How do we engage our customers? And ultimately, the culture part, I think, is still challenging. A lot of the companies that I talk to, they are back in the office at some level. If they're not 100%, they are 20%. And how they've accomplished that is they've gotten rid of the leases that they had where everybody had a desk. Now it's more of a shared space. So there's kind of a core, maybe the core leadership team is in the office 3 days a week, and then they have flex space. So they've really reduced that expense line for rent, which has been a good thing. But I think long-term, the watch out is on the culture and retention and loyalty, and what impact will that have on business value over time needs to play out.
Yeah. And, going back to your whole push and pulls discussion, I think especially for older people, like, I'll just, just in my own situation, I mean, the fun part of my job was meeting with clients, meeting with staff, all the personal interaction, meeting with people who refer me business, and that's all disappeared. So it's like, what I'm left with is all the drudgery of it all. And I think a lot of people, because of that, I think a lot of people in their 60s, especially in the accounting world, are just leaving. It's just.
Yeah. I think that's that middle ground that we talked about, which is, there's no crisis. It's just a boredom, maybe, right?
Yeah.
And there's just a desire for something different. So it's not a good, it's not a bad, just sort of in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people in that. And I think it's happened a number of times in our economy, when it's after 9/11 crisis, after 2008, 2009 crisis, COVID crisis. And the survey data backs that up, that there are business owners, while we did the survey, let's say, 5-6 years ago, and the average was 10 years out, 7 to 10 years out is maybe when I want to, sell my company. And there was data still active in COVID. I can't say it was post-COVID, but the survey data during COVID we saw that shift. We saw the shift in more of a 3 to 5 year, that business owners were kind of like, what, I want to tap out. And I get it. I get it. It's tough. It's tough to be a business owner. It's tough to be a business owner in a tough economy. It doesn't add any fuel to the fire. But I will say, and I'm sure you say this too with your clients about timing the market, it's very difficult to time the market.
Yeah.
So Pat, kind of tying back to your other question, why I certainly advocate for starting now, don't wait, best time was yesterday to get started, is because we can't time the market. And hopefully people will think about that little bluebird story that I shared with my own experience, that the business was ready to sell. It was prepared to sell, and the transaction went through in a relatively short period of time. And there's no reason that you can't have a business that is actually prepared to sell at any time. It will enable you to run a better business. And should that little bluebird come a-calling, you'll be ready.
Yeah, one of the things that we've added to our suite of services here is we're also training successors at this point, and or coaching them. And just yesterday we had a meeting with one and said pretty much what you just said there is, look, you want to own this, you want to build it, you want to grow it to 2, 3, 4, 5 times the size that your father has. Well, you want to build it so it's sellable and transferable, because if you do, then those goals are going to be realized. You're going to enjoy life in the business. You mentioned that earlier too. And you'll be ready for whatever transition you decide to, whatever route you decide to go down, sell to a third party, transfer to your kids the way your dad's doing with you, key employees, whatever it is, the business will be ready, you'll be ready, and you'll enjoy the ride along the way. So we're bumping up on time here. At the outset, I said we're going to hit on a few common pitfalls, and we've hit on a few. There's a big endless list, and we've knocked out a few of them here. Is there anyone that you came into today's conversation with Laurie thinking, boy, I hope we have time to talk about this one, that we haven't talked about? Is there one that comes to mind that we haven't talked about?
Well, there's two, if I can sort of squeeze two in. The first is, who should own your business after you? We touched on it a little bit, and I go to much more detail in the book, because the sooner you start thinking about who the right fit will be, you can reverse engineer. And I share some examples of successful entrepreneurs that have done that. And it's certainly one of the things that I do with clients is, let's work backwards. If we have to change our business model, if we need to make other adjustments to be more attractive and transferable to those potential acquirers, whether it's your family, whether it's management, whether it's third party, I'm agnostic about that. But the point is to start the process and be able to reverse engineer. The second thing that I think is a really good topic in the book is having business owner advisory team, the boat, who's in your boat. And you guys are clearly in the boat. I want to be in the boat. And I share some examples of the value that a mergers and acquisitions intermediary can add to the process, whether it's on the buy side or on the sell side. Mm-hmm. And the role that this whole process can play for you as you think about strategic planning. I'll just footnote it with, just like with your business, and you probably or hopefully have a strategic plan. This book and my methodology as an advisor is to work with clients to create a strategic plan for their transition. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have it in writing, is it something you're really committed to? If it's just in your head and it's not fully articulated, are you going to accomplish it? If we write down our goals, we're more than 40% likely to achieve those goals. Yeah. And so I want hopefully people today to think about what's actionable, what will they take away from our conversation, and not just listen to it and go, yeah, that sounds great, but I want you to do something. And if that do something is read the book, then great, that's doing something. But if there are other things that you can start doing in the next 30, 60, 90 days, I just hope that this conversation helps people to do that.
Excellent. Yeah, good. Yeah, the name of the book again is The Business Transition Handbook: How to Avoid Succession Pitfalls and Create Valuable Exit Options. One of the things I'll just say about it that I appreciate about the book, at the end of each chapter, you've got summary of takeaways and a little, helpful action exercise, which is always helpful. Helps people to do what you just said, put it in writing, which we completely agree with. Got to do that. Right, Walter?
Definitely. So, Laurie, thank you so much. This has been great. We've enjoyed it. I'm sure our listeners have too. Just tell our listeners a little bit more about the book, how they can get a copy, and how they can get in contact with you.
The Business Transition Handbook is for sale on Amazon, and they're welcome to also learn more about it on my website, which is thebusinesstransitionsherpa.com. The businesstransitionhandbook.com is a shortcut, but either way, you'll find it there. And to Pat's point, because every chapter has exercises and actionable things that you can do, I've created a digital companion to the book that you can download for free. And so if you're reading the book and you don't want to mark it up and you want to have another piece of paper, this is a PDF that you can get as a complimentary gift. And you can get that on thebusinesstransitionhandbook.com. Just simply sign up and you'll get it sent to you. So I really do hope people take advantage of that. And the other thing that I mentioned earlier about the personal readiness assessment, if you look at the footer on my website, I have personal and business assessments available. It's complimentary. There's no charge for that. They can take those assessments and then I'd be happy to meet with them and discuss the results. So again, thebusinesstransitionSherpa.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining us today.
It was absolutely my pleasure. Thanks to both of you.
And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860, and you can reach me at 301-951-9090. You can always access resources at grfcpa.com and nslp.com as well. Until next time, thanks for listening. This is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.